Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Urban Legends video. Alright, let's go ahead and we'll do another entry here based on one of your suggestions. This one is a past suggestion, and I went all the way back to the very beginning, the very first Urban Legends suggestion video, over 2 years ago in fact. So it was quite fascinating to go all that far back and then find this one buried within there. This one has some very good information because it has to do with one of my favorite subjects, in this case being something being cursed. With this item in this being a cursed piece of land that to this day cannot be tampered with in any way whatsoever, otherwise there are tragic circumstances involved. And the curse originates from the death of a so-called first samurai located there in Tokyo, and the unfortunate 1,000+ year curse that was attached to his death. So lots of good information to share. And in this case, it's the curse of the angry spirit of Taira no Masakado, who you're looking at a drawing of here. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all that fascinating information related to this urban legend. So what is this curse? The curse of, in this case, Taira no Masakado. Well, a brief history first about him. I mentioned that he was the so-called first samurai because it seems like it's considered not necessarily 100%, but in most cases people do regard him as being one of the earliest samurais there in Japan. You have to go way back in time for this type of information. This was in this case in the 10th century, so thousands of years back in other words. At that time, the capital city was a place called Kyoto. And he, in turn, this Taira no Masakado, was someone who was a small warlord of some sort that was there reigning on some portion of a land, while at the same time there was yet the ruling government, the ruling body of the emperor. So in his case, Taira no Masakado, he was someone who fought, I guess, minor skirmishes. He was able to again gain some land, gain some territory, but it was a little bit after that, after I guess his legend grew and he became known again as one of the earliest or first samurai, that he himself decided that he wanted to declare himself ruler of all of Japan. Remember, this was the very same time that there was already an emperor within Japan, but then this guy was considering himself the new emperor of Japan. Of course, the old emperor decided to take action immediately. He was not about to have his ruling taken over by this new guy. So a bounty was placed on this first samurai, and when that happened, then everyone was going after Taira no Masakado. It was seems like a brutal set of skirmishes that followed thereafter. Ultimately, it ended with Masakado dying, in this case by an arrow shot straight to him right between the eyes. There was a battle of some sort, something very, very ferocious, and when he died, in order to showcase proof of his death, his head was severed from his body, decapitated in other words, and then taken back to Kyoto to showcase proof to that emperor that yes, he was dead. This, though, if I'm not mistaken, at that time was still considered something to be very bad to do. In this case, a fallen soldier, a fallen samurai, to have their head cut off, it was just not the right thing to do, even if they were considered an enemy. I guess it would be like the closest thing to something along the lines of the worst item you can do to a fallen soldier after their death. So the legend goes that right after that point, after it was displayed somewhere there in Kyoto, that's when the head was getting restless. It either came to life, or it in turn realized, that it was fallen in such a disgraceful, disrespectful manner that it was furious. It took a flight of its own. The way it's described, it's just literally levitated, started moving, and then just shot off all the way back to its original land where, in this case, Tokyo is today. And the reason for this was because the head, again, completely just infuriated at having been detached from his body, was frantically searching for it thereafter. It searched for a long time, long and wide. It seemed like villagers, towns, other places consistently saw this head do its frantic quest one day after the other, so much so that it was to the point that this head just finally went to its last, I guess, no pun intended, but its last legs. And when that happened, that's when it crashed in some land that's now forever known as the Hill of Masakado's Head. So it seems like even then, this severed head had its own small half-life of sorts, because once it crashed, then that was it. It was no longer able to search for its body. But the villagers that saw all of this, of course, realizing that they were dealing with something almost sacred after its journey and after its adventures, because of a severed head in this case, no less. They decided to treat it with as much respect as possible and ensure that its wrath can be calmed. In this case, they picked it up, they washed it, they held a ceremony, they buried it, they tried everything they could, including erecting a shrine to make sure that its fury and that its I guess its tragic circumstance is recognized, and then also that the honor is finally placed back onto this fallen samurai. And so go to a little bit while later, or a long time later, and that's where the shrine stayed as is. Everyone that lived around that area for all that time ensured that this location was truly set in stone, set untouched, because of the almost miracle-like association with that severed head. Again, they were paying as much respect as possible to it. But nothing is permanent in this world, and so cut to a little time later, in this case over 1,000 years, and there was around that severed head and around that location of that shrine, buildings that started to become erected. And in this case, with Tokyo, in essence, becoming a city of its own, one of the largest, one of the most densely populated within the world, it in turn grew around this shrine. It created a weird juxtaposition of sorts, because here you have this untouched land in one of the most land deprived pieces of properties or parts of cities there in pretty much in the entire world. So there were several instances where people within Tokyo wanted to take over that shrine, wanted to take over that land, because they wanted to place something else that they considered more useful. In this case, either office buildings or some of the department stores, something along those lines. The first known instance, though, of this curse taking over because of that disrespect was somewhere around 1923. Apparently there was a great earthquake there, the Great Kanto earthquake that took place, and so because of it, there needed to be more land, I guess, taken over, more buildings built to recuperate, and the Ministry of Finance decided to put an office building right there, ignoring all of the locals, everyone there stating not to do that because of the sacredness associated with this land. They still built it, but within 2 years there were no less than 14 office workers that died within that location, most of them considered from unnatural causes. Now what that was explicitly, I don't know. The information still remains a little bit brief, but 14 people died, 2 years time period, just within that office, again located over the shrine. And then the curse continued because other employees around that area had what were considered unexplainable injuries, and ironically mostly to the feet and to their legs, again hearkening to the fact that in this case that head didn't have its body, never found its body, so it seemed like it wanted to make sure that others that did have their bodies intact could feel the misery that it has. So in this case, the officials, whoever I guess was in charge of that office building, they believe now in the curse of that location, and so because of it, they decided to raise that building, tear it down, in other words, replace it all over again with a shrine, including a mound, like building it all from scratch again, almost like it was before, and then held a ritual to ensure that the angry spirit of the first samurai was truly, in this case, appeased. But people don't learn, and so cut to a couple of years later, in this case just before World War II, or the build up to World War II, at the 1,000-year anniversary from it, there was a time period where all throughout every year there was a ritual held, there was in this case a ceremony held, there was something along the lines of people coming in, making sure that they could pay their respects to it. But because of the buildup of World War II, the people around that area were getting much more busier, making sure that the Great War essentially was being taken care of, and so they forgot about these ceremonies. And so it seems like on the 1,000-year anniversary, this first samurai, Taira no Masakado, wanted to make sure that he was not forgotten. And so in another way involving his curse, he dealt a lightning bolt. Again, according to the urban legends of this, he dealt a lightning bolt straight from the sky right next to the building, right next to his shrine, destroying most of that building. So again, it's pure coincidence, or in this case, the wrath of Taira no Masakado. It's up to you to decide, but the people quickly realized that they shouldn't have stopped doing these ceremonies for him on a yearly basis, and so yet again they ensured that the ceremonies were back, the memorial was erected, everything was done to try to appease him one more time. And then finally, after World War II, of course, with the U.S. occupying Japan for a certain time period there, and still in this case, to instance, to this day in some places, but for the most part, right after World War II, with them taking over Japan and helping them rebuild these things, that's when the soldiers, the Americans, found the shrine dedicated to Taira no Masakado. And then in their case, not necessarily believing these urban legends and the curse associated with the first samurai, they decided, let's go ahead and let's also raise this shrine, tear it down, and then try to make no less a parking space for their military vehicles. Obviously a big disrespect to this angry spirit. So whenever they tried to do so, the very first instance the bulldozer tried to tear things down, it in turn was somehow flipped over, and then the driver was killed. And then all throughout this construction there were more accidents that happened, all of them again considered either coincidence or something along the lines of the damage of this angry samurai. And so because of it, the Japanese officials finally did enough begging to the U.S. military to try to stop it, and they did so. They agreed, the Americans left, and so because of it, the shrine was once again put back to its location, left as is, and then to this day, cut to all these decades later, it still stands. You're looking at some of those pictures, in fact, of how it looks like today. But that's it. That's all the information, all the urban legends tied to this curse, this so-called curse of the angry spirit of Taira no Masakado. I love these kind of stories because to me, being able to visit this location, you're almost walking into that realm of this angry spirit. But as long as, of course, you're paying your respects and ensuring that you're leaving either some offering, some of these pictures you saw that people would leave things there, then you can ensure that nothing else bad will happen, while at the same time being able to enjoy what's considered that sacred land there. But still, that's what also fascinates me, is the idea Japan and Tokyo having such tight real estate, like it's absolutely unbelievable, and yet here is this small piece of land that remains completely untouched to this very day because of the respect that everyone has for this angry spirit. But again, that's it. That's all the info. If anyone has anything else to share regarding this urban legend, regarding this curse of the angry spirit of Taira no Masakado, please post those comments below. It would be great to hear. Anybody happen to have a chance to visit that location? Anyone know anybody that was lucky enough to do so? Anybody see, hear, feel anything there? Please, that'd be really good to hear too. So, alright everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.